Hello, greetings and salutations, and welcome to What the Trans.
What the Trans?
Yeah, we're back with episode 101.
Oh yes, you thought you were rid of us with the US folk coming in, but we're back.
Yes, it's us back here on the shores of Blighty this week, and obviously throwing back to Alyssa and Val next week. Fun times. What did you think of their first episode?
Oh, it was a marathon and a half on the length of it, but
It was a longer one.
but I was just playing Minecraft on the whole length of listening to it in a preview, so I was like, I can just do a long, grindy task and have a listen in.
Yeah, so a lot of people, that's how quite a lot of people consume podcasts, including me, while I'm gaming and playing Minecraft or Shipbreaker or Power Wash Simulator and stuff like that. You have a podcast on while you play a game, and then you can passively learn some stuff while you're playing around with a fake power washer, which is always good fun. So how are you? How's your week been?
My week's been alright. I've sort of just chilled out at the moment. I'm actually looking for a new job at the moment.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so I decided that I currently do the IT services desk, the old, have you tried turning it off and on again?
Ah, yes.
But I realised I am sick of IT and I want a different job. So I just thought, I'll just put if you're interested in hiring me for something, get in touch on our emails, alex@whatthetrans, send us a DM, give me a job, please.
So, just for any recruitment consultants who might happen to be listening, what sort of job are you after? Are you looking to stay with IT, or are you gonna do something different?
So for that one, it's sort of I just want to have an escape from IT in its whole sense, and I'm sort of open to whatever job comes my way. I was sort of like, if there was any apprenticeships on the government website that had something interesting, I was going to apply for it. So when I spotted was like this archaeology one the other day.
Cool.
And I was like, that sounds like a cool job. I'll give it a go.
I think the main problem with archaeology is like actually finding the job.
Oh yeah.
Because once you've got the qualification, you've then got to find a job, and there's archaeology tends not to be a massive priority, so it doesn't necessarily get loads of funding. I'm not trying to put you off specifically, but there might, it might be the fascinating thing to do, but making a career out of it might be a bit tricky. A little bit like being in a band.
Oh, exactly. Although I think, wasn't it with HS2, there was just a resurgence in a large amount of archaeology.
That's true,
sort of things that come up.
Because they were uncovering so much stuff that was buried. But yeah, I think HS2, and a few years ago when it was being done, I think Crossrail also found some stuff in sunny London. Check me knowing about London's public transport infrastructure. It's mostly because I'm jealous.
Oh, Leo Lizzie line. But it's literally just throw a stone and then some ancient Roman ruins just lying about somewhere.
There's Roman ruins in Manchester. I think anywhere that's got Cester or Chester at the back half of the name has got Roman ruins in it, or at least that's what I was taught at school.
All the fun of the archaeology on that front. But aside from me digging up whatever jobs I could find,
like an archaeologist.
How's your week been?
Fine. Honestly, I haven't really done anything particularly interesting. Obviously, health stuff is an ongoing process. It looks like, as well as having a gluten intolerance, I also have a milk intolerance as well. So
oh no,
I know it's rubbish. So I can't have like various kinds of chocolate, and I have to have oat milk on my cereal now, which is fine because it's actually quite nice. So there's several milk alternatives that are genuinely quite nice. But yeah, I've been testing out all the different things, and so I more or less like soy. I think oat milk's excellent. Yeah, because previously I'd only had soy milk when I was going to a festival, and I thought, well, soy milk keeps out of the fridge better than actual milk does, particularly if it was going to be boiling hot. So I took soy milk along for that. But recently I've been using it or other milk alternatives because I kind of have to. And that's the most interesting thing I've been doing.
Well, to be fair, there's quite a lot to chat about there, because I was just thinking, my dad does have a dairy allergy himself. Did you mention oat milk as well? Because that's been good for a coconut milk alternative. And
yeah, oat milk is a thing. Would recommend.
Yeah, because was it more like a milk allergy itself, or was it like a dairy as the product?
It seems to be dairy, yeah. So, like, I've had troubles with cheese and chocolate that kind of sets off this particular bloated, unpleasant, painful in my tum-tum. So, yeah, and it's been happening with where it's not just after I've had, milk on my cereal or in a cup of tea. It's been happening after I've had your cheese and your dairy milk. And so, yes, I've been exploring other alternatives. Riveting stuff, I know, dear listener.
So, I was about to chat. Have you discovered the joys of Vitalite yet?
Vitalite? Oh, the spread stuff.
Because that's sort of our dairy alternative
I see.
for butter.
Yeah, so there's several. I think we just go for the, off-brand, not Flora stuff.
Flora, and it's fine.
Yeah. Well, the Flora stuff that's not branded, so it's cheaper,
Oh, exactly. It's whatever brand of what you can't believe isn't butter.
Exactly.
This side of things. And speaking of things you can't believe about, is the conversion therapy debate that recently happened today.
Great segue.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, but yes, that was a thing that happened. Go on.
God, because it was such a mess. So on the 1st of March, there was a private members bill that was put forward by Lloyd Russell Moyle that was meant to ban conversion therapy and was meant to be voted on to get a second reading in Parliament. However, due to filibustering and assholery from Miriam Cates, Neil Hanvey and other shameless MPs, this bill's unable to be voted on. As a last-ditch effort to get it voted on, there was a request to close the debate and then go and vote, which was then disputed by Miriam Cates yelling out objection. And this was meant that the MPs had to vote to close the debate, which then led to 65 MPs voting to close it as a majority. But unfortunately, due to it not being a majority over 100 MPs, it meant that due to parliamentary rules, it couldn't go through. And all of this because of Miriam Cates shouting out objection in the Houses of Parliament, and because of that, calls of shame rang out in the chamber, and also during the debate, the government said they opposed the bill.
So this was the bill that we talked about last time, isn't it? Which was at that point we were talking about it was yet to occur, and now it has occurred in the most obvious way possible, and even if it had been voted on, it wouldn't have been, and if it had been voted on and passed, it wouldn't have been the votes of the Tory party that did that, it would have been the votes of the Lib Dems, Labour, the SNP, because they tend to vote progressively, although more on that later, and the Tories tend not to. Let's, put that as lightly as we can. So yes, because of a few MPs talking the bill out and essentially filibustering, as the Americans would say, deliberately speaking for so long that they prevented a vote from taking place. Yeah, I'd say it's shocking, but it's so disappointingly obvious. Yeah?
Oh, exactly. I mean, if anything, I think it was the whole debate was is symbolic of the whole saga of the conversion therapy ban and other trans rights situations, because it was transphobic twats holding up progress by blustering on about their crooked concerns while blasting horrific transphobic language, lying and acting in bad faith, taking up all the airtime, depriving LGBT people of their own voices and delaying things so no actions take place. And then that very same small minority then exploited their institutional advantage by filibustering and using their minority vote to make the debate last longer than what was needed, to then cause the vote to be denied. And basically, it's just...
Yeah. Gutted. And I'm sure Lloyd Russell Moyle is as well, because he's there trying to do something that the government have promised to do. The government do keep saying, oh yes, there'll be a conversion therapy ban, but they're never doing anything about it. So the fact that they have repeatedly said, yes, we're still doing a ban, but then they've said that the government opposed this bill, which is a conversion therapy ban, it's like, that's something,
Oh, definitely. It's as if they're trying to push their own conversion therapy ban to ban gender-affirming care, which I think was something that Kemi Badenoch was pushing as well.
Yes, indeed. That's definitely something she said in the past about how, using a conversion therapy ban to then ban gender-affirming care. And that's a concern I've been raising on this podcast for several years now.
And will continue raising as this still goes on.
Yeah, so disappointed it didn't make it through, but there's a certain school of thought that Miriam Cates has got her own agenda when it comes to conversion therapy.
Oh, exactly. I've seen a lot of this echoed around Twitter, and then I found a little source about it. And how can I... this is sort of like where I need to figure out how to say it without getting, sued by Miriam Cates or something, because this sounds like something that she would do. but according to the Sheffield Tribune, she has been allegedly associated with a Sheffield church known for practicing conversion therapy on LGBT people because she was a senior leader from 2016 to 2018 and had been member of a congregation for 10 years. The Sheffield Tribune has been saying that there could have been some connection to that one.
Indeed, yeah. So, and we'll link to that Sheffield Tribune article. But yes, so it might be that she has her own agenda for trying to talk out a conversion therapy bill because she wants conversion therapy to still be allowed religiously. It would seem. Allegedly.
You can hear us struggling not to get sued here, isn't it?
Yes, indeed.
This is going to be a reoccurring theme throughout this episode.
Yes, unfortunately it is. So let's move on to the next thing that we could get sued over.
Yay!
Yeah, so the other...
Subscribe to our Patreon for our legal bills.
Yes, help with legal costs. So the other story that you probably couldn't avoid this week is the news that the NHS will no longer be doing any new prescriptions for puberty blockers to trans youth under the age of 16. They say that the medicines will still be accessible but only through a clinical trial, the details of which haven't yet been announced because of course not. An interim report was released last week on March the 12th and in it a breakdown of the consultation results was given. Now this was the consultation of course that we ourselves made a guide for. In all they received a total of 4,040 responses to the consultation, 3,492 of which were in support of puberty blockers, and they've been put together in the report as Group A, with just 180 people objecting to puberty blockers use and being classified as Group B. Now, the remaining 368 people clearly didn't show one way or another. The report then does a rough grouping of the themes found in each group's responses to each of the questions that were asked. It says that, quote, over 2,600 respondents provided free text responses explaining why they felt that additional evidence needs to be considered in the proposals, and then lists out the general themes or the talking points of many of the responses from both groups A and B. I won't bore you with every single detail, but a lot of the Group A responses did highlight the concerns that trans people were not being listened to, as so often happens, that forcing children into a medical trial to access needed treatment is unethical, that international evidence and best practice guidance had been ignored, the fact that puberty blockers are used for cis children with a number of conditions with no problems, and a host of other, quite good points. Now, we ourselves were briefly mentioned in the report because of the guidance that we made for filling it out. The report included a table showing different organisations who'd made any guidance, including ourselves, Mermaids, Transgender Trend, one or two others, next to the number of people who'd copied in their answers verbatim from whichever guidance. So the report showed that 23 people had copy-pasted what we'd written into their responses, which, while kind of flattering, is not what we made the guidance for. The report does confirm that almost all duplicate responses from different people and IP addresses have been counted as individual responses and haven't been removed from the dataset as a result of being duplicates. So that's good. Now, even if they had removed the duplicates though, if we add together all of them from Mermaids and from us, it still only comes to about 160. And again, the responses saying, no, you're doing this wrong from Group A were over 3,400 compared to 118 Group B. So even if the duplicates had been removed, people arguing in favour of better trans healthcare would still have overwhelmingly outnumbered the ones who don't. Now, the report obviously goes so far as to list out the various themes raised in the responses, which again, I'm not going to list all of, we'll put a link in the description, but there is a notable difference in the facts offered by the pro-trans responses in Group A compared to the anti-trans ones in Group B. Group B talks about a social contagion and rapid onset gender dysphoria as if those are real things, and suggests that any neurodivergent young person be screened out of any potential research protocol, for example. So if you're autistic or in some way neurodivergent, you're not getting any gender treatment if these people get their way. So even a kindly reading of this report suggests that there is a lot of information and its many good points that have been completely sidelined. And you had better believe that the anti-trans crowd are now proclaiming this interim report as a victory. So, yeah. Ugh.
Fucking hell. Bloody hell.
Yeah, indeed. Just to say, it's worth pointing out that this is not a ban of puberty blockers. They're just advising not making any new prescriptions for them. People who are already on the blockers, which isn't very many people, they will continue to receive them, but there won't be any new ones. So that's, bad.
Literally, it's this is trans kids are going to suffer from not being able to transition.
Yeah.
It's just absolutely horrid.
Yeah, indeed. And there have been so many responses to the interim report. There's obviously a good statement from Mermaids, one or two other organisations who have put a response in and have pointed out that this will harm trans young people. The fact that they are not going to be able to access this medication that, presses pause on puberty, which will then cause them to go through puberty, the wrong puberty, and will end up with them being unable to change certain aspects of themselves without serious effort or, a lot of
more invasive treatments to get the
Yeah, exactly, to kind of correct some stuff, because testosterone is a hell of a drug, and if you're, experiencing testosterone poisoning, stuff will happen to you that you don't want. That in itself can be traumatic for trans young people, and I know that because I was a trans young person, and when it happened to me, it was horrendous. I mean, even if I wasn't out, I still wasn't enjoying the process.
Yeah, exactly. It's just horrid. This is sort of a thing about our own egos on on some of the numbers of responses that came out as verbatim. So we almost beat transgender trend in the amount of verbatim responses.
Yeah.
Considering that we put this together in 4 days and only shared it for a week, and the entire efforts of transgender trend and all the time they had and all their established resources, and we smashed them in a week.
We nearly beat them out completely. And well, I think that would have come up if they had decided to delete all of the duplicate responses. But they didn't. They decided to count them all. So, but either way, we still nearly outnumbered them, which is kind of not bad. It's kind of not bad. On the subject of the guidance that we created, one of our team was essentially in charge of creating that guidance. And so let's have a chat with them, shall we? Hello, Shroomy. Thank you very much for joining us. Cracking straight on with it then, what was your response to the announcements this week and the interim?
It was not the news.
Yeah, that's a mood.
It's very disappointing, obviously. Like, there's no other way to say it. It's just dog shit.
Yeah, pretty much.
So, given the work that you and your team sort of put into it, were you surprised by this?
I think the phrase that I would use is disappointed but not surprised. Surprise is the wrong word. I was very, well, obviously I was upset about it, but I'm not sure what I expected really. I don't know. I've been doing various activism for about 5 years now, and honestly, I felt really deflated. I felt really sad, and I felt like kind of like, what's the point? What's the point of putting in all this effort and doing all these things and, just doesn't feel like it changes anything. But it was interesting that we actually made it into that report because enough people have used our consultation in a way that is noticeable that their analysis software picked it up, that what the trans is mentioned in the consultation report as a prominent campaign. Alongside transgender trend, we had almost the same number of responses as them.
Yes.
So isn't that great?
Yes.
Really, it's not even that they made this decision. There's very little change to the original policy. There's one change that's mostly for the worse, actually. But there's a really interesting document that I only just saw now. The actual policy document, the new one, is literally 5 pages. They didn't really bother to go through all the changes. They just basically said, yeah, we're not going to change anything. But the consultation report that is by NHS England and not by Tonic, which is the company that actually analyzed the data, is quite long. It kind of goes one by one through the main points from group A and group B, and then it kind of tries to respond to them, and it kind of I don't know really a better way to say it than it tries to mansplain to the people responding to the consultation why they're wrong. Actually to both sides. Both group A and group B, they more or less kind of saying, yeah, don't care, I didn't ask. We're the professionals, we know better. It's the whole tone of the document is so extremely paternalistic, but there's something particularly interesting. Question 1. For the very first response, it kind of just jumped out at me. So the first thing is that the experiences, views, and outcomes of transgender people, patients, and their families had not been considered as evidence, as well as the views of experts in the field. And then NHS England response: the evidence review by the National Institute of Health and Care Excellence follows the NHS England specialist commissioning process and template, there's a typo there as well. Don't you love that? And is based on the outcomes and search criteria agreed by an expert working group that had an independent chair. The policy proposition had been formed following NHS England's established methods method for forming clinical commissioning policies. This method takes account of relevant peer-reviewed quality academic and clinical research. It does not take account of lived experiences. So they're kind of just straight up saying, yeah, we don't care about your lived experiences, like, at all. And they actually said the same to Group B as well, when they were like, well, you didn't take into account the detransitioners. And they were like, yeah, because we don't care about lived experiences. We only care about a very narrow type of research.
So when I said on our emergency pod, tell them your stories and make sure they know about that situation, they just said, no, we don't care about that on that, essentially.
Pretty much. They said that our method doesn't include that. And I think that's very telling. And I feel like that's obviously a major reason for these kinds of decisions, like this way of thinking. And it's messed up because NHS has this thing called patient and public involvement, which is exactly for that purpose, to take into account lived experiences of different types of people. So a very interesting response. Again, they talk about the evidence review, but I've already talked about it in the article, but the evidence review is crap. It has 9 studies, 9. Like, as someone who has studied biological sciences, if you include less than 10 references in your work, you're not likely to get a good grade, and even that is not a lot. Even when I was writing some kind of essay for university just for studying, nothing else, I would sometimes get to 20 references or more. So the fact that they were 9 studies, yeah, that's fine. And they're all only going to be the same kind of evidence, and we're going to exclude all of this other stuff. It's just ridiculous. And actually, even before the first consultation, they said that people had identified 19 further studies, and they pretty much ignored all of them and didn't include them.
So given the quite narrow range of evidence that they are considering, why do you think they even bothered making it a consultation?
That's a good question. I think to look like they had done it.
Yeah, I think it's about the optics as well, because it doesn't seem like... Surely they must have known that the majority of people are going to talk about their own lived experience, because the majority of people are not doctors and clinicians. And so people will be getting in touch to say, here's why this is important. Here's why I wish I'd had puberty blockers available when I had been a teenager. Here's what they did for me. All these different experiences, which they then have just said in black and white that they're just going to completely ignore that.
And why did they not just straight up say it when they first did the consultation to add some transparency to the matter in the first place?
Yeah.
I think Shroomi's right. I think it's an optics thing. Wanting to look like you've done more than you actually are prepared to.
Well, what I suspect is that it might be a requirement, there might be an NHS policy that says you have to do this if you want to make changes like this, so it might be that they're doing it because they have to, without any intention of actually listening to it. That's the impression that I'm getting anyway.
Yeah.
But I don't know enough about that to say for sure. But that wouldn't surprise me, because this kind of stuff, they had to pay a company to analyze all of those responses, the 4,000 plus responses. I'm sure that it cost them significant money, so I don't know if they would have bothered if they didn't have to. Because clearly they don't seem to want to actually listen to the responses.
Yeah.
Clearly. I do plan to go through this document where they NHS explain their responses to people in more detail, because I find it really interesting. But so far, that very first response was already amazing.
Yeah.
We don't care about lived experiences pretty much.
Pretty much tells it all, doesn't it?
They're just falling back on cystrionics.
Yeah. There's one change that to me appears like it's for the worse. At first I thought it was for the better, but actually after reading it I was like, that sounds not so good. But I don't know if it's actually changed as much in practice. But anyways, they say that as a change to their proposed policy, PSH would not be available through an exceptional circumstances route. So that wording already makes you wonder, okay, so they had a loophole for people to get them, but they decided to close that loophole. And they're saying some stakeholders, including the new providers of gender incongruent services for children and young people, were concerned at how such a pathway could operate appropriately, effectively and equitably, and NHS England has agreed with that view. So the one type of people that they listen to, the people who are actually, maybe this is too much puberty blockers, you should make it worse. The 180 responses of Group B were pretty much a lot of them weren't even agreeing with the policy. They were this policy isn't bad enough, you need to make it worse.
Yeah.
Ban it outright. Don't do anything. Although, they also tended to ask for more research as well. So we all seem to want more research. There's one thing we have in common, huh? Yeah, the research protocol thing, again, it's not defined yet, but like I said before, that's not the problem. The problem is that they are kind of forcing people into it. Okay, so instead of that, exceptional circumstances route, I don't know the practical difference, but it says the patient's clinician would have to apply under the individual funding request process. Under the process, the clinician making the request would would need to explain why the patient's clinical circumstances are exceptional, show all the available clinical evidence for why they believe the patient would benefit more from the treatment than other patients with the same condition. They would also need to demonstrate why a treatment that is not routinely commissioned by the NHS is an appropriate treatment option. So basically, it's not like entirely impossible, but the doctor in charge would have to like bend over backwards to justify it for you.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot hard for any doctor, even a doctor who is intensely supportive of one of their trans patients, as you say, would have to do quite a lot to be able to get that prescribing option. And will they find they might have the will, but will they honestly have the time to go through all of these steps?
All that stuff.
Yeah.
Indeed. But it also says that the people who are currently taking puberty blockers, which is less than 100 of them in the UK, will be able to continue. So that's the one good thing.
Yes.
A lot of the people responding to the consultation were rightfully worried about that, but at least the people currently taking them, it won't be taken away from them. But if you knew, then tough luck, buddy. In terms of the study, it does say, like, until the study is established, no child or young person will have access to puberty blockers. But a very interesting thing instead is that the study design process will define access criteria, and they think that it will initially be focused on children with early onset gender incongruence/dysphoria. And as we might know, early onset gender dysphoria is like fucking not an actual medical term. Doesn't exist. It's not defined.
That's some pseudoscience bullshit, is what that is.
Yeah. So that alone is already a red flag. So
definitely.
I don't know. Sometimes I question why I do all these things, but
Don't we all?
I don't regret doing it.
Yeah, I mean, I think consultation fatigue is a real thing, unfortunately, and there does come a point where it's like, okay, we have done all of the stuff you've asked us to do. We have bent over backwards, we've filled out all the consultations, and there have been many, and we've done this and we've done that, and you're still not giving us our rights, and it's time for direct action.
I agree.
Really?
I mean, I think it's always a good time to go and pick at NHS England for trans people, but especially now.
Yes.
I think it's a very, very good time.
Yeah,
also want to give a
absolutely.
shout out to Lucy and
that's
Mila and
where
Rowan,
we
who
will
worked
leave
with
it.
me
Thank you very
on this
much
consultation
for
guide
joining us
and
today.
on the other
And
one that
thank
we
you
did
very
as well
much
about the
for-
referral
okay,
pathway.
go
Thank
on.
you so much. It would not be possible without them. They really did the bulk of the work. I mostly did the editing and kind of putting it together for all of you. And thank you to everyone who filled it in. As much as I'm deflated myself, I want to say that I think it's still valuable to do, because at least we can say, look, we have given you the evidence, we have told you everything you need to know. If you're not listening, that's your problem now.
Yeah, pretty much.
Thank you very much. You did some great work on that.
So yeah, thank you everyone.
Thanks, Shroomy.
And your team did great work as well.
Very much so. I was extremely impressed with how it all worked, even if I'm not particularly impressed with the result of it.
Yeah, they did very well.
But now we must move on.
So from the NHS not listening to LGBT people to a certain cabinet minister not listening to
LGBT people. Gosh, it's like a theme.
In February, Lapita Tatra Foundation invited the Women and Equalities Minister, Kemi Badenoch, to a roundtable for multiple LGBT rights organisations for a discussion and engage in a conversation. Something not out of the ordinary if you engage LGBT rights organisations extensively, as you put it. However, for Kemi Badenoch, this is quite frankly something that would be extraordinary for her, as in a Freedom of Information Act request, it was found that she only met with two organisations, and those organisations were Sex Matters and Transgender Trend. And for this reason, it became unsurprising when the offer for a roundtable was rejected by calamitous Kemi. In response, the Tatra Foundation then said the government had ample opportunity to engage with the LGBT groups, but has not done so. The Peter Tatra Foundation offered to facilitate a dialogue, and they were saddened that the genuine offer of constructive engagement was refused. Also adding that the Sex Matters and Transgender Trend were not representative of a wider LGBT community, and that it was a lost opportunity. A joint discussion with Badenoch could have helped inform policy making and given useful input to the Conservative manifesto for the upcoming general election.
Yes. Not surprising, really, because Kemi Badenoch is not interested in engaging with the wider LGBT community.
No, exactly. It's sort of pushing a cultural war to benefit herself, and she knows it's not a benefit to be a decent human being.
Yeah, that's not what she's interested in, really. I mean, this didn't surprise me when I heard about it, of course. The fact that she's only met with those two organisations, I mean, Transgender Trend in particular are just such an egregious organisation. You're amazed, how are they still even functioning?
But that whole thing with Kemi Badenoch, it just seemed like a bit of a stunt from Peter Tatchell. Some people do accuse Peter of that at times as well.
Yeah, indeed. But equally, like, with them saying that it's a lost opportunity, it kind of is. They are right by saying that, because Kemi Badenoch could make it look like she's listening to LGBT rights organisations. She could have the meetings with Stonewall, the Peter Tatchell Foundation, everybody else. She doesn't have to listen to them, as indeed she evidently does not. But the fact she's not even making the effort to actually meet those groups and make it look like that she's engaging with it, it's just making the direction of travel extremely obvious.
Oh, exactly. It's physically forcing her to call her own shit on what she's talking about. Just symbolises what it is in the first place.
So from a government minister not listening, we now move on to somebody else not listening.
Do we just name the title of this pod? Nobody's listening.
Nobody is listening to us. Yes, we could in fact do that. Up next, of course, we have some very disappointing but ultimately unsurprising news about the Labour Party, and in particular Keir Starmer, who last week said he would support a ban on trans people participating in sports and would also be in favour of outing trans kids to their parents. This was in an article in The Telegraph. And Starmer said, "The important thing is that sports governing bodies take a lead on this, and they are doing that, and we're supportive of what they're doing, particularly in elite sport. That's where the decision should be taken, and in the end, common sense has to prevail in terms of safety and integrity of sport." In the same interview, on the subject of outing trans kids to their parents, he said, "Of course I'd want to know. I say that as a parent. I'd want to know, and I think the vast majority of parents would want to know. That's why we have to have national guidance on it, and they should try to make it cross-party, because it's not helpful to parents or schools to have this as a toxic divide when what's needed is practical, common sense advice." Which is funny, because what he's suggesting there is neither common sense nor particularly practical in the real world. So what did you think of this? I don't know what accent
I think
that
that
was,
is.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Whenever we're talking about the Labour Party, it's always a mess of trying to look at it in a lawyerly way, and then there's sometimes we just think, we shouldn't be needing to look at this in a lawyerly way in the first place. Of like, stop saying this shit, just say don't out trans kids to parents, full stop. It's just so bloody annoying. And
yeah, it's pretty sickening, isn't it? Just the fact that he's supposed to be he is the head of Labour, which likes to say it's the party of equal rights, and it has said that numerous times and says, wait till we get in, we'll clear up all of this bullshit that the Tories are doing to trans people. But the leader of the Labour Party is perpetuating the same shit that the government is. And so voting for Labour, it looks like it's a vote for just carrying on with
Toryism.
Yeah, exactly.
Red Toryism, isn't it?
Keir Starmer's a red Tory, isn't he? And we spoke to a couple of people who were really not pleased with this development, so let's listen to that.
Alright, so I'm with Jenny Black from the Trans Network of Unison, she, her. So I think we were chatting a bit earlier, of course, with the comments from Keir Starmer. What do you make of those comments he's made on voting bodies?
It kind of like, I have deja vu when I hear this talk, about trans people in sport, because this argument has gone on for so long. But going back a number of years, good few years ago, before society or the media and politicians made society turn on trans people, most sports governing bodies were really, really open to trans participation. And they may have done it crudely, but they just looked for some basic kind of tests to be fulfilled, be it on kind of testosterone or estrogen levels, etc. And it was really basic, and maybe arguably too basic, I suppose, in some areas. But it was left to sports governing bodies to do that, and individual sports made their own decisions. And I hear Keir Starmer talking, and I just think to myself, well, where have you been? He says, it's for sports governing bodies to take the lead, where they always have done. And they've done it without political interference. They've managed to do it up until now without anybody telling them what to do. But now, in the last couple of years, we've had a complete reversal on this, where because of the pressure from politicians and the media, they've almost kind of outlawed trans people taking part in sport, even to the point of, was it the World Chess Governing Body that's got a temporary ban? How on earth does that work? Are we saying that there's a difference in the ability to play chess between men and women, and therefore trans women have an advantage, over cisgender women. I just don't understand it. I find it's a crazy situation for us to be in now. Keir Starmer, he says we have to let common sense prevail, but I think we've reached a point in life or in society where common sense is basically it's in the eye of the beholder sort of thing, isn't it? Who decides what common sense is now? Because common sense certainly doesn't appear to be common sense anymore, not in Westminster anyway.
Yeah, exactly. It sort of almost sounded like it was did it sound like it was like an endorsement in a way, and that kind of the bands?
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, he actually said that he was supportive of what they're doing. So on the one hand, he says you have to leave it to sport and bodies, but then he applies pressure in a way by saying common sense has to prevail, and we are support for what they're doing. So any of those organisations that feel like or have a gender critical, transphobic kind of approach have basically been endorsed by the leader of the Labour Party. That's how I read that situation anyway, and that's how I read the naivety of him as an individual on this whole subject.
Oh, exactly. I wonder if it would have been the same approach if the sports bodies did allow trans women to compete, whether he'd still continue to do that support.
I honestly don't believe that would be the case because, it's like a tree in the wind.
Oh, exactly. The flopping spine or whatever it's called.
yeah, most definitely. Yes, I've seen more rigid daffodils, put it that way.
Too true. So I suppose with that, whether they'd stand up for things, I suppose they've got to have their back. Do you think with that, are Labour a party of equal rights still, even if they're flip-flopping like this?
No, I think I keep on being reminded that the Equality Act 2010 was the last final act of the last Labour government. And, they keep hanging their hat on that, but that's not enough because 2010 is a long time ago and equality issues have most certainly developed, from then. The world has changed and Labour hasn't kept pace. And what Labour's doing is it tends now to be just looking for where public opinion is and that public opinion is being driven by the media and the right-wing narrative. And unfortunately, they're hanging on to the coattails of it.
Oh, exactly. And that entire whole moral panic and trying to sort of ride along anti-trans lines in a way, which really does knock the confidence of LGBT people. And do you reckon there's a chance that they can restore that kind of confidence, or do you think it's a bit...
I think it would require change of a few key people, particularly in his front bench, and also change a leader as well. I think that would be what's needed. He clearly doesn't have the kind of moral backbone to stand by stand upright and support the trans, non-binary and gender diverse community. He's clearly not prepared to do that. He's hanging on the coattails of this right-wing opinion. And unfortunately, some of his front benchers, people who should know better and we expect more from, follow suit as well. I mean, the recent comments by people like Wes Streeting, who's a member of the LGBT plus community, is really, really worrying. And again, I think that damages Labour's credibility as a party of equalities, but not just LGBT plus equalities, all equalities, particularly when you look at the Diane Abbott situation recently. So it is really worrying. And I think it can only be restored by some fundamental changes in personnel.
Oh, exactly. I suppose following on the thread of Wes Streeting there, there's some concerns about a recent health conference that's coming up where Wes Streeting's been invited to speak on, hasn't there?
I just want to say first off, I'm not in the health sector with Unison. I work in local government, so that's my service area. However, as a Unison member and a member of the trans, non-binary and gender diverse caucus that exists within Unison, it is really worrying that in the year of the LGBT plus workers and right in the middle of Unison's trans equality campaign, our annual health conference have invited Wes Streeting to be a guest speaker, the keynote speaker actually. And that's worrying when we consider Wes's remarks that he made earlier in the year on Sky News, or sorry, Sky TV, about setting up separate hospital wards for trans people. And that's really alarming for trans people to hear that. I was in hospital not so long ago for an operation, and at the same time, Baroness Nicholson and others such as like Joanne Cherry, QC at the time, were campaigning to have trans people put onto separate wards and separate side rooms. And I was laying wait for my operation, wondering where I was going to wake up, in the ward that I started off at or somewhere else. And Wes Streeting has done absolutely nothing to allay that fear. And he's actually buying into that idea that trans people present a risk in the single-sex wards in hospitals. And not only is it bad as a Labour MP has that view, and as the shadow health minister he has that view, but he's a Unison member, and his views completely fly in the face of Unison's views, and how Unison defines trans people and its commitment to fighting for trans equality. It completely flies in the face of all of that. So it is really, really worrying they've chosen to invite him in.
Oh, definitely. I think if you're trying to put the message of equality in healthcare, I think someone who seems to advocate for removing trans people from women's wards, it doesn't really send a message. So I suppose we've got to see whether there's any movements to get him uninvited.
There are representations being made, and I have to give credit where credit's due. Unison leadership are listening to us. They are acknowledging the pointy arguments that we're putting forward. Unison is, if nothing else, a democratic organisation, and our views and comments, which have been made by numerous members, not just the trans, non-binary, and gender diverse members, but we also, we're aware of other areas of the union raising their concerns. They're going to be discussed at a health group meeting, and a democratic decision will be made there by those members. I just hope that they prove themselves to be trans allies by their actions as opposed to by their words. So we're optimistic.
Yeah, fingers crossed on that one, and I hope it hopefully it goes the way we hope it does.
Most definitely do.
But in that case, thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Alex. Then we also managed to speak to Alexis from Labour for Trans Rights, who was also pretty unequivocal. First off, Alexis, thank you so much for joining us.
Very well.
We'll get straight into it then. What did you make of Starmer's comments?
Unsurprised. There's no other word for it. At this point, there's nothing he could do other than come out and say everything I did was wrong that would surprise me. It's par for the course. It's exactly what we've come to expect from him, and it's yet another incredibly soul-crushing moment of trying to steer the party towards a progressive and more equality-focused mindset, especially at a time when we had the brief glimmer of hope that he might maybe change his mind about things after what was said at PMQs, but I think we knew from the start that was going to be extremely performative, and it turns out we were right. There's nothing more really that can be said for plunging into the depths of enabling transphobia, unless he wants to come out tomorrow and say that actually we've been talking to groups like LWD and we full-heartedly agree and we're going to scrap everything, which would be I wouldn't count it out as a tactic to win votes, but this is the environment we live in now, an environment where we get to worry about the supposed progressive party stripping our rights for protections away, at the same time as its supporters tell us that it's the progressive and it's the sensible choice.
So from what I'm hearing, it sounds like Labour aren't the party of equal rights, by the sounds of it.
I would say, much like with pretty much every major political party in the country, there are major systemic problems with the party itself, especially the leadership, in terms of supporting trans rights. There are really good MPs, there are really good councillors, there are really good people within Labour, but Keir Starmer and his shadow cabinet have made it clear they don't care about promoting trans equality or progressing the decades of struggle that we fought for. And we do our best to sort of maintain that pressure, maintain that criticism, keep pushing and talking to people to try and fight back, because it can't last forever. It can't last forever. Keir Starmer is probably going to be the next prime minister. I nearly said president.
If only.
I've been watching some more news.
Love some more news.
Yes, Keir Starmer's not going to be prime minister forever, and he's not going to be leader of the Labour Party forever. And it's my hope that as socialists and as people of principle who believe in things like the truth, justice, and equality, we'll be able to stand up in the next few years, hold the party accountable, and eventually make that push to take the party back and sort of put it on the right course when it comes to these issues. Already, my co-chair Alex is running for chair and leader of Young Labour. That's on an explicitly pro-trans platform. There is still so much potential future within the party that is like proudly and supportively pro-trans, but that's in the future, and we have to keep fighting for that. Whilst at the moment, the man at top, the man whose Labour Party it currently is more than happy to throw us under the bus alongside his shadow cabinet, who are willing to step on us and remind us that we are not protected.
So finally, then, you've touched on some of this already, but how do you think Labour could restore confidence among the LGBTQ community?
I think the first thing most people would say is remove the whip from Rosie Duffield, which would be a good start. Remove the whip from Rosie Duffield, but there's so much more that needs to be done, because it's not just individuals in the party anymore. It's not just the PLP that's the problem now. It's become infected throughout the party. Rampant transphobia and bigotry. It's not just removing people. It's about setting forward concrete policies that are actually in our interest. It's backing down from these disgusting culture war comments and trying to snap up the votes of the slim minority of people who are very loud and very vocal, but who polls have shown are not in the majority at all. There are a very small, albeit loud group who seem to get to dictate the direction of politics in the UK. They need to stop pandering to those people, implement some policies that would actually help people for a change. Looking at things like, I don't know, maybe removing the barrier to trans healthcare that we've been talking about for years upon years. Instituting an informed consent model, adding things like a non-binary gender signifier to legal documents. There's so many policies that could be done and would need to be done to engage and get the trust back. Because at this point, if they were to turn around and say, yes, sorry, we made a mistake, it's all good now, we promise, I wouldn't believe them, because what evidence have we seen for it? Actions speak louder than words, and at the moment the party is offering basically nothing, and I'm fed up of just being offered the status quo. I want to see real progression. I want to see trans medical care taken away from this horrible bureaucratic nightmare of a system, where I've spent the last 3 years now fighting to try and get testosterone blockers, and I've only just been able to get them because of the rules and systems in place that allow a GP to just say no. That's unthinkable. If any other person in the country, if any cis person went to a GP and said, I need this medication, and they said no, can't give it to you, people would raise an eyebrow. But because it's a trans issue, and because there's the shared care agreement and the GIC, they don't know what's the deal, and as a result, people like me are forced to wait years for potentially life-saving medication. That needs to change. That fundamentally needs to change. But no party's talking about it. All they ever want to talk about is women in sport and protecting young girls. We need to fundamentally move the conversation away, and unless Labour is willing to do that, is willing to apologise, remove the transphobia that's so rife within the party at all ranks, not just in the PLP. It's increasingly growing amongst the network of councillors and of individual members. Unless they're willing to stand up and tackle that, I've seen Labour councillors describe trans people as all sorts, and I've submitted complaints about it, and to my knowledge, no action has been taken. They haven't been suspended. They haven't been so much as investigated, according to them.
And also even a thing about the transphobia definition not being in the Labour Party at the moment.
Yeah, we still don't, and we never will. And we never will at the moment, because there's no transphobia definition. And despite LGBT Labour promising to make it a big part of their platform and to get it done, there's no appetite amongst actual Labour leadership, because why would they? Especially when it's going to directly call out the things that they've done and said. At this point, there's no chance it's going to be passed, no matter what they say. If it's going to be passed, the only way it'll be passed is if it's a watered down version that
doesn't do anything.
that's so vague.
That doesn't know anything, because Keir Starmer, Wes Streeting, Tonya Antonazzi especially, they're all guilty of it. They've all made transphobic comments. They've all said and done transphobic things. There's no way that the party would ever allow it to be passed, because it would immediately put them on notice. And you can't do that, obviously, or rather, they can't let it happen. So there's no chance of it happening. It's one of the fundamental things that we've pushed for and we've said needs to happen in order for the party to change. But as long as Keir Starmer's leader, we're not gonna see that kind of definition.
Well, Alexis, thank you very much. So yeah, a disappointing turn from Sir Keir Starmer, man of the people, there.
I suppose from disappointment, there is something that is a bit more of a positive news. During a general meeting on March the 3rd, the Kenwood Ladies Pond Association voted against banning trans women from swimming in the ladies section of the Hampstead Pond. In 2019, the City of London Corporation also stated that trans women would not be banned from the pond. It is understood that a large majority of people voted against banning trans women from the pond. However, in a video that became viral, it showed the reaction of the proposers of that rule, and they didn't take it too well. They yelled out in the middle of the meeting in not the most diplomatic language, calling the voters traitors and shame on you, and some other concerning things that just went on.
Yeah, but then, so the people who've proposed this at the association's meeting were the ones calling out traitors and shame on you because they didn't get their way, because that's absolutely an adult thing to do and not something that you're supposed to get out of your system when you're still at school.
I mean, I saw the video. I looked at the article on the Telegraph, and they had the video linked at the bottom. I was like, hang on, I haven't seen this yet.
See.
And it looked utterly unhinged.
Yeah, that's not really surprising, really, because so many of the anti-trans activists are kind of unhinged, really, and they make the whole life around hating trans people. There's that kind of little rule from the Trash Future podcast, which is excellent. You should check it out. Once somebody starts posting transphobia on the internet, before long, it will be all they post. There will be nothing else. Like, we've seen that happen with a failed comedy writer and a former children's author, and maybe she'll come up again later in the episode. What a surprise that might be. So, yeah, I'm glad that the vote went the way it did. Obviously, I don't plan to go swimming in Hampstead because I don't live in London and I can't swim. And I definitely can't swim, what with the MS and stuff, you know? It's more like, I'll just get into a really cold body of water and just kind of wait.
Oh, exactly. I think my days of going into cold bodies of water are done as well, because I used to do like a canoeing club thing in my local town, where you literally went into the river and then you did a bunch of kayaking, essentially, which I gave up because I couldn't be bothered. And this is pre-Brexit, so you didn't have to worry about the sewer companies polluting the river. But now it's very much different, and I very much do not want to swim in that river anymore.
Yeah, you want to steer well clear of it. But yeah, so well done to the Kenwood Ladies Pond Association, which is not something I expected to say.
It sounds very upper class and posh, doesn't it?
It does sound rather posh, but it is some good news, even from that, fairly small corner of London, which is always nice to have a little bit of progress, isn't it? And particularly with it being quite a large majority of people who voted against banning trans people. Well, trans women specifically, because this stuff is always aimed at trans women.
It's that whole trans misogyny spiral.
Oh yes. But yeah, well done to the Pond Association. Cool, good stuff. And from good stuff to, well, it's still kind of some bad stuff, really, because I've written this in the notes. Is Liz Truss still on her bullshit? Because, yeah, she is. So here we are, finally in Broken Record Corner. We regret to inform you that Liz Truss is still on her bullshit. She's now published a draft bill, the Health and Equality Act's Amendment Bill, which would severely restrict the ability of trans youngsters to transition, and it would change the 2010 Equality Act to define sex on the basis of the sex assigned at birth. To be specific, it does a few different things that affect legislation that already exists. For example, it would, and I'm just going to quote trans rights here for this bit, amend the Health and Care Act 2022 by introducing a new offence for healthcare professionals who prescribe, administer or supply medicinal products to children under 18 as part of treatment for gender dysphoria. So far, so Texas. But any health professionals found guilty of breaching that offence would face fines or prison or both. It would also ban any public authority in England from recognising children's gender inconsistent with their biological sex, and would, as I've mentioned, make an amendment to the Equality Act of 2010. So the bill was scheduled to be read in the Commons on the 15th of March, which is yesterday as we record this, but even though 10 Downing Street reportedly welcomed the sentiment of the bill, their words, some MPs were apparently encouraged to talk out the previous bill so Truss's wouldn't have a chance to be read out, which is exactly what ended up happening. We believe it's been added up for the discussion on Friday 22nd, but it's entirely possible we'll get a replay of the 15th. The bill will be added for later on in the afternoon, and then MPs will take as much time as they can talking about whatever's on the schedule before it.
And it'll be at the bottom of the list as well.
Yeah, exactly. So after the non-reading of her bill, Truss issued a statement saying, "I'm furious that Labour MPs have filibustered in Parliament today to prevent debate of my private member's bill."
So can you put a bit more posh in that? I feel like it needs a bit more posh, doesn't it?
"Concerned parents will want to know why Labour don't even want to discuss how to protect children in single-sex spaces, let alone put those protections into law. Labour care more about ideology than the protection of children." Ooh, boy, will we come back to that. "It is vital that we legislate to safeguard single-sex spaces and prevent children from making irreversible decisions about their bodies. These policies have popular support, and legislation is required in this area because non-statutory guidance gives too much latitude to extremist ideologues determined to use any loopholes available to promote their dangerous agenda." Now, Kemi Badenoch has also weighed in and accused Labour of ruining their plans, where she said on Twix, "Just now, Labour MPs prevented debate on a new law to protect children and single-sex spaces. Instead, they used parliamentary time to discuss ferret name choices. Keir Starmer is terrified of debate on safeguarding, and his MPs actively work to ignore the concerns of constituents." But the thing is, though, even though both Truss and Badenoch accused Labour MPs of talking out her bill, it was actually both Tory and Labour MPs who took their time speaking about the bill beforehand. In fact, there were actually more Tory MPs who stood up and spoke than Labour ones. The Tories had 12 and Labour had 9. According to PA, so that's Press Association reports, Tory MPs were asked to filibuster by the party whips to ensure that Truss's bill didn't have a reading. So it wasn't really Labour's fault now, was it, Liz? But yeah, and just to go back to it, Labour care more about ideology than the protection of children. Are you having a laugh? What ideology are they caring about? You know, they're basically diet Tories.
It was fascinating to hear about the 12 other Tories that also talked it out after being asked by 10 Downing Street, because this is from 10 Downing Street, and Kemi Badenoch would have probably allowed this sort of bill to go through. So what the question is, which senior member of 10 Downing Street decided to make the call for that?
Yeah, it seems like the left hand doesn't know that, well, that even there is a right hand, you know? That never mind knowing what the right hand is doing, it's a mystery that why it's there, I think. Because that's then very inconsistent from the government. And so Liz Truss seemed so upset that her bill didn't get a reading. We'll see if it does next week, but I'm expecting the same thing to happen again, really.
Well, as you said about the left hand, I'm surprised they didn't cut off the left hand for just having the word left on it.
Damn you, lefty. I thought it was hilarious. I honestly did. The fact that the bill didn't even get a reading, because several people were talking about it's a bill to do with the kidnapping of pets that was on the schedule beforehand, and everybody spent so long talking about it. There were 2 Labour MPs, both of them stood up and spoke for half an hour. So well done them. But there were more Tory MPs that spoke about that bill than Labour ones. So they talked out the time just as much as the Labour people did. And so it seems like there's ideological divisions within the Tory party. Good heavens, what a surprise that is.
With them just talking about their pets as well. Who wouldn't want to spend an extra 30 minutes just chatting about their pets in the middle of Parliament? I would love to do that.
Absolutely. I don't think it was their pets specifically. It's about...
Yeah, it was Max the Ferret was an example used at one point.
Yes, true.
So like, oh yeah, I had a friend who had a ferret called Max. And they literally just raised a point of order for just that, and then sat down after they said I had a friend who had a ferret called Max, and then just sat down.
Fine, so maybe they did do a certain amount of talking about their pets, but good, frankly, rather than them talking about Max the Ferret than instituting some kind of Alabama-esque law where people are prosecuted, criminally prosecuted for providing gender-affirming care. Because if a bill like that becomes law... time to flee, I think.
Oh, exactly. It's like the kind of content that was in that bill, if we're talking about the bill itself, it was horrific. I mean, I didn't manage to look fully into the thing, but I could already tell it was like a horror show in of itself. And those kinds of things I'd be more likely to come out of our current partner podcast compared to our current one. Subtle plug.
Yeah, exactly. You kind of expect that from the hardcore religious right in America, but not so from a country that seems to pride itself on how progressive it is, that is just sliding backwards so quickly, skidding towards something really, really bad. And in fact, St. Lucifer have a whole song about this called Backsliding off the album Death Crush Polare. You should check it out.
That's one hell of a title.
Yeah. It was great. We issued that album on purple vinyl because, of course, we did. So I'm glad that bill got talked out, and I hope that happens again. Frankly, I hope it happens as many times as needed for Liz Truss to get the idea we're not interested. Take this bullshit somewhere else.
Sometimes you just want to put Liz Truss in a room where she just can't get out and is put away, like a certain room like room 101.
Yes, I see what you did there. So with this being episode 101, and now we finished talking about the news, we are going to take a little trip to Room 101, but not in the George Orwell 1984 sort of way where it contains the worst thing in the world. We're talking about Room 101 in the sense of the BBC television programme of the same name, where people would come in and pick things that they would like to banish to Room 101 and would have to argue the case for it. And some of them went in and some of them didn't. So that's what we're going to be doing. So we talked about, on social media, we put a message out about what would you like to see banished into Room 101? What do you never want to hear from again? Tell us those things and we'll talk about them on the podcast. And there's a couple of things in here that are particularly obvious and that you might absolutely expect, and there are some that were a little bit specific.
Left field.
Yeah, definitely. In a good way, because trans people are, people, and we have pet peeves as much as the next, I certainly do. Anyway, so what did we have? What did we get on social media?
So yeah, there were quite a few things that came in, and I always try to avoid mentioning this person and always try every single excuse not to mention this, but the one thing that came up the most out of every single thing, and this has appeared 7 times across 3 or 4 social media platforms, J.K. Rowling appeared.
Yep, unsurprising. She was, of course, in the news this week for doing a Holocaust denying. Essentially, denying that trans people were victims of the Holocaust, which of course they were. May the 5th or the 6th in 1933, just after the Nazis came to power, the Institut für Sexualwissenschaft, or the Institute of Sex Research, run by Magnus Hirschfeld, was broken into, the library looted, and it was set on fire. The reports are unclear whether there was a trans woman inside the library at the time when the building was burned down. They took all of these irreplaceable things out of the library and burned to them a few days later in a big public book burning. There's a very famous photograph of Nazi book burnings that's taken from some film that was taken at that event, and that's what they were burning. They were burning the work of this institute. So if you're surprised that there's no, people who are surprised that trans people seem to have appeared overnight, there's a reason you think...
Because all that data was gone.
All that data was gone, and J.K. Rowling denied this. She said, "Oh, don't be ridiculous." So, yeah, there's several articles about it, one of which we will link in the description if you're interested to read it. But yeah, she's now, she did a Holocaust denial. So she's on a certain track, I think.
We can't really say much without... Basically, we know a certain reputation on the litigiousness side of things of this, so I'm just going to try and keep very quiet, because I don't even avoid talking about J.K. Rowling to avoid getting sued. It's just I hate giving attention to that situation.
Ooh, she's got more attention than we could ever give her, I think. You know, she did that one herself, tragically.
Yeah.
So I'm not surprised that turned up so many times. I think I am surprised that was the thing that turned up the most. But anyway, you had a point about death of the author.
Yeah, because whenever people talk about J.K. Rowling, there's one term that always seems to appear when it comes to J.K. Rowling, and it's like people talk about, oh yeah, we need to treat all artistic works like the death of the author, where once a piece is published, like a book, whatever the artist says after the publication doesn't count as canon and should count as if anything afterwards the author is dead. And it always annoys me that when people try and use that as a blanket rule is a thing.
Yeah, they try and say, "Oh no, I need my security blanket of these kids' books that were published years ago and kind of weren't very good when they were published." People arguing that they should be allowed to still enjoy the problematic thing because they seem to be unable to move on. But kind of not surprising that she popped up in this, what would we like to put into Room 101 thing, because it was all over the news this week. Well, it was certainly all over social media that J.K. Rowling had added something new to her repertoire, shall we say?
J.K. Rowling did appear 7 times, but also what appeared 5 times was trans healthcare and the healthcare inside of UK and around the world, which was things like waiting lists, gender identity clinics, the gatekeeping in general.
Inside and outside the community, isn't it? So I did note that coming up, where it's like people in the trans community who are themselves gatekeeping and saying, "Oh no, you have to do X, Y, and Z before you can be considered a real whatever," because that's what the outside world is doing to us. Can we not do that to each other, please?
Exactly. It's like, I think that the community, I know the name of it specifically does that, is trans meds.
Yes.
And if you're a trans med right now, stop listening to us. I don't want you as part of our audience, is probably the best way of putting it, because it's just because they're fucking idiots is the simplest way of putting it. So I just wanted to put that out there, because if you gatekeep anything, I don't like you when it comes to being trans.
Yes, indeed. There's enough gatekeeping already. So there were a few other things that appeared multiple times, of course. The Tories, they popped up 4 times. I was surprised it was only the 4, really.
Yeah, exactly, because it only had 4 times, and then Labour only appeared once, and it was only because it said red and blue Tories. And then that was the only mention of Labour in general. It was quite a...
Yeah, I think the news about Keir Starmer's comments kind of went under the radar, and I think that's at least in part because of, J.K. Rowling.
How much of a surprise is that, right?
Right. Crazy stuff. So yes, there were a few other things that came up. Obviously, fascism appeared twice because, perfectly justifiable. That should go into Room 101 and stay there. So what else did we have in putting into Room 101? Well, according to Twitter, there's the UK, which, fair enough. Quote tweeting bigots, because that kind of does increase the platform of them. Just drawing more attention.
And then provides engagement. Even just a screenshot of the tweet itself is an engagement of some form that then makes people then go, oh, I'll just navigate to that person's Twitter.
Yeah, exactly.
Another one was the jackets and coats that don't come with hanging loops, so when you put your jacket on a hook, you can't hang up your coat.
Yeah, indeed. And on the subject of clothes that don't have pockets were also there.
Oh, exactly. Well, yeah, because that's such a pain in the neck.
It is. Because, if you're assigned male at birth, you're given clothes with pockets from, day one, whereas you then transition and start wearing dresses and blouses and stuff, and women's trousers tend not to have pockets for some stupid reason.
Oh, exactly. It's the first example of male privilege. No, not really. But
not sure that's not what I'd have gone with for the first one. So, of course, mentioned specifically were a couple of Tory politicians. Kemi Badenoch was there.
fancy that.
And on the subject of Kemi Badnoch, discrimination was also on the list.
We also had one from a Twitter user, Felix Fern from Transactivism UK, who said, the notion of things existing on a binary scale, especially in regards to sex, gender and sexuality, we already know that none of those things are legitimate binaries, but society's still so reluctant to accept research. It harms cis and trans people alike.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more, frankly. Another thing that people would like to put into Room 101 was, of course, first puberty.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And then we said about fascists previously, Les Maga. Then there's also another person is Helen Joyce. You probably saw the whole thing about the Harry Potter situation, but we'll get back to that in a second, because...
We sure will. Well, so the thing with MAGA is that it's ruined red baseball caps. Nobody can wear a red baseball cap now without making anybody else around them kind of nervous, because it's like, is that a MAGA cap? It just kind of ruined that item of clothing, but I'm not sure. I don't know, baseball caps, are they still a big thing? Because they were in the 2000s because new metal bands wore them backwards. I don't know. But yes, Helen Joyce was mentioned, presumably her taste in fiction.
And where she read them as well, wasn't it? So
yeah, quite. That was the news. On the subject of the news, there's also news coverage that is basically just trans folk spouting their nonsense, but with no pushback, with no balance given, with no right of reply given to trans people. That sort of...
And the book tours they go on to say, oh, I've been cancelled.
I've been silenced, they say, from the front page of a national newspaper.
I wish I was so silent I appeared like that.
I know, right?
Another set of person who would probably be like that, and a person called Ray Blanchard, who...
Yes, indeed. So he is, of course, the inventor of autogynephilia, which is essentially the idea that trans women only transition because they're sexually excited by the idea of themselves as women. Google him, he's a real shit. Ray Blanchard, also known as Whispers.
Whenever I saw the word on autogynephilia, I didn't realise it till just now. I kept pronouncing in my head as autogenophilia.
Yes, yeah. I did that initially, and it was only when someone else who is eminently qualified and knowledgeable in these matters, and they pronounced it as autogynephilia, and I was like, oh, that's how you say it, and now it makes
You
sense.
actually get all the letters actually pronounced when you say it like that.
So I think that wraps it up for Twitter, doesn't it? So what else did we have? We have Mastodon.
Yes, our other social media platform. By the way, we're this is a perfect way to basically advertise our social medias at this point. To say we're on this platform, and this platform. So on Mastodon, Christine Burns said liars, all of them, all the liars.
If only.
Yeah.
If only we could.
I almost put it under Tories, but then it could also apply to Labour, Tories, any kind of thing.
Definitely.
So that sort of didn't work. Cops was the other one.
For sure, yeah. ACAB in all times and places. Initially I was like, Christine Burns said that. But no, it was somebody else, but it was still on Mastodon. But yeah, another one from Mastodon was, of course, our old friend Ricky Gervais. Wouldn't it be super to put him in Room 101? Yeah, because I'm just bored of hearing from him now, really. Oh, I'm so edgy by spouting the most basic bitch transphobia possible. That makes him cool and edgy, does it? Yeah, alright, cool, fine.
Yeah, I mainly prefer James Acaster. That was a good thing. Everyone always brings that up.
Good. I'm a stand-up comedian.
And that is literally the case with what was Ricky Gervais saying. I'm a stand-up comedian. Bullshit. Stuff comes out my mouth. So that was what was on Mastodon. Then we got to Blue Sky. Our other one, we're on Blue Sky. The phrase, you can change your gender, but you can't change your sex. And that was Rose Schmidt said that. I think we had Rose on an interview a little bit back about the trans quizzing. That was a good interview.
Yes, indeed. So people that say that are essentially saying you will always be the thing that you were born as, and at no point can you change or move on from that. Another suggestion from Blue Sky was academics in completely unrelated disciplines who are lauded as experts on trans people, and yes, I feel that.
Kathleen Stock.
Yes, I feel that is absolutely accurate.
Oh, exactly. Someone wants to be a bit more controversial and said, I feel need to be controversial, but like the trans joy, specifically when it's used to say, we want the event to focus on trans people in society, but not on the barriers / hate movement / politics. Good vibes only, please.
Yeah, the good vibes only, please people are just always so infuriating, because you're banishing a large part of the experience for marginalised communities, but also for anybody, really. There's a whole Jungian archetype about the shadow self and about how accepting that there is that part of yourself that exists and pretending it doesn't exist is not helpful.
Oh, exactly.
Not saying that Carl Jung was right about everything or indeed anything, but I'm just saying people have known for a while that, you have to accept your whole self. Anyway, what else did we have?
Yeah, so as well as that, anyone who says to vote Labour because the Tories are worse, that was another one that came up, so that was another one.
We've touched on that already, haven't we? Vote Labour because the Tories are worse. Another one was when people say, okay, but I don't need to organise collectively for that, stop wasting my time. Like, come on, what makes you so fucking special?
Some other people who call us stunning and brave.
Yes, that's a phrase.
Talking down, a condescension.
Yeah, definitely that condescension and say, oh, you're so brave. Like, rather than saying trans people are brave, why not try and
make it so we don't have to be brave?
Make it so we don't have to be brave. Yeah, exactly.
And it's that whole survivorship bias, isn't it, as well?
Yeah.
So that was Blue Sky. The next one we have, we're also on Threads. Oh, gosh, this is just an advertisement of our social medias, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
The next thing we've got is winter. Yeah, winter sucks.
Yeah, I don't know, though. I mean, I quite like autumn, and in fairness, autumn is when my birthday is, so I have always quite liked that and the falling leaves and the crunch of them and those lovely crisp clear days you start getting. But yeah, winter can be an absolute shit, particularly if you are like many people in the UK during the winter and you have to decide between paying for heating or paying for food.
Oh, exactly. And also the two most expensive months for me is December and February, because firstly December's Christmas, and then February there's like 5 different birthdays in that one month.
Oof. Fun times. And another suggestion from Threads was the liquids rule at the airport. And yeah, fair enough. That's got to be a faff.
That is so true. I think I recently had my been on a few trips in the airport, and I was wondering whether my estrogen bottle could fit on the hand luggage because I didn't have any hold luggage. So that was a fun dilemma I had to go through recently because of just those annoying liquids. So after that, we got our Discord. Everyone should check out our Discord.
Yes,
someone
indeed.
said, made up studies with flawed references.
Yes, that takes us back to Ray Blanchard, doesn't it?
I mean,
but yeah, absolutely, because bullshit studies that are dressed up to look like where the evidence is lacking, but it's made out to be this epoch-shattering, proving thing has harmed trans people, but also a couple of generations of British school kids because of the MMR vaccine hoax.
And still affects us to this day.
So, we, as well as putting a call out on social media, we also approached several people on social media, people that we've interacted with in the past, and asked them what they'd like to put into Room 101.
Yeah, one of the persons we spoke to was Katie Montgomery, who first said Harry Potter porn.
Topical.
Yeah, this was like right after the Helen Joyce situation came out, and when she said that, I was like, are you right with me putting that on the pod? And she went, yeah, you can put it on the pod, but if you want something more serious, you can put science deniers, or if you wanted something a bit more bitchy, pick-me's.
Pick me.
Or for the whole I'm not like the other
yeah.
LGBT people.
Yes, we've all met those people, I think.
Oh my God, yeah.
Another suggestion from a different person that we approached was Janice Turner.
It was Helen, or maybe Mum saying Janice.
So yeah, Janice Turner. Good suggestion, I think. A leading light in turfism. Ruined a lot of things.
I sort of lost track of which turf is which, because there's just so many that just appear out the woodworks, isn't it?
Well, yes, but Janice Turner has been active for quite a while, and she predates the current moral panic about trans people. But she always used largely the same talking points, essentially. So, yes, I think she's got a certain amount of responsibility.
Yeah, so that was one good example. We also spoke to Shash, who also said gender binary, which is so true. Gender binary. I think a few people mentioned that, but as I said, it's always a good example. And then we spoke to Jesso Thompson, who came up with a really good one.
Yes, indeed. The notion that equality requires treating people exactly the same, when in reality it requires addressing existing imbalances and differences to ensure that everyone's rights are protected. And that links in with the good vibes only thing, because that is people saying, no, I'm not going to look at structural existing imbalances and differences. I just want to talk about, nice things. So yeah, Jess Thompson's absolutely bang on there that equality is not just treating people the same. Sometimes it requires some people being treated differently in order to have equality of outcome.
Oh, exactly. And then the next one, well, from Vivian Wolf, was saying, well, in that case, I'm going to put cis people talking about us without us, especially in the media and parliament. We have 0 trans journalists in the mainstream press, no columns, no radio shows, no MPs, and it seems no voice. I think trans people in general feel voiceless and hear people talking about them all the time. I think we need powerful trans voices in the mainstream and government talking about trans issues, advocating for us.
Who don't know what they're talking about, talking over us. Yeah, absolutely. Room 101. Into the bin with it. Get in the sea.
Yes. Most of her situations could easily be chalked up to that itself.
Yeah. So we also had Claire from Translucent who said, GICs! Whole system is unfit for purpose and needs a complete simplified overhaul on the basis of informed consent with GPs contractually bound to non-discrimination clauses. And yeah, absolutely every word of that. It is unfit for purpose. It's dragging its feet. It's collapsing. And
we pretty much mentioned it on the things as well, but it's just an utter mess.
Mallory Moore suggested cop ideology and pointed us to a tweet where she said, cops, policing as an institution and as an ideology are destroying society, community, are crushing autonomous efforts by oppressed people to resist oppression everywhere. Policing as an ideology is destroying solidarity in the civilian world by putting authority before liberty, which is also quite difficult to dispute, frankly. Well put. As Mallory so often is. So we also had Alyssa from What the Trans USA chiming in and coming in with a really important issue for our times, the struggle of our age, which is of course wearing Crocs and sandals with socks.
Oh, Crocs or sandals with socks, exactly. It's a fashion scourge that
Yes.
rocks our society, that indoctrinates our kids into thinking we can just lounge around in public with just those socks and sandals.
Socks and sandals. It's just embarrassing.
What is it? Because they're too prude to not have their feet on the show. Spot on. Instagram, the next one was the very own Soup Nazi, Posey Parker.
Yes, indeed.
That was from Alex.
And another suggestion from Instagram it had 3 suggestions in it with a different tone. So a genuine request is country and borders and the concept of land ownership. The semi-serious suggestion was stickers that don't peel off properly, which, God, that is so annoying.
Exactly, especially when they're paperbacked instead of plastic.
Right? And the joking one was doing duck face in dating profile photos, which that is super annoying. I mean, yes, you want to show off your lipstick, but are you a duck?
You must be absolutely quackers.
Yeah. You're fired. Yes, did it.
We brought one in.
Another suggestion from Instagram was, of course, and she's come up before, Liz Truss.
I'm sick of that name.
I know.
It's going to appear next episode, most likely, and the episode after, and then maybe there's a break from episode 103, and then it will come up in episode 105, and we'll be given a very happy break. Let's hold myself on that prediction.
That'll be nice, won't it? But let's see what happens at the next scheduled reading of her bill. Anyway, what else do we get from Instagram?
So there was cis normativity, so that was another one. So it was the concept of waiting and perhaps of passing.
Yeah, because how is a non-binary person supposed to, quote-unquote, pass, you know? What are you trying to pass as? And the idea that, you know, in order to be a valid trans person, you have to be able to pass as a cis person is just, it's such a destructive idea, and I think it has done legitimate harm to the community.
Oh, exactly.
Just
it
that idea.
brings back that cis normativity and the body shaming of other trans people and the gatekeeping, and all of these just link very well on occasion.
They do, don't they just?
Sometimes I wish I'd group these on topics rather than social media platforms now, but
well,
here we are.
Here we are. And there was, of course, the quote-unquote jokes about identifying as an inanimate object, like an attack helicopter.
Exactly. I'll spin my skirt so fast I'll fly and destroy you.
Quite. Just put razor blades in the end of the skirt, just right at the bottom, and then when you do dress go spinny, you can do some chopping.
Because wasn't there like a Colin Firth thing where he had a belt with blades spinning around? Oh, you might not have seen it, but it was like a guy who had a belt that was had kitchen knives and then a big electric motor that just spun around. I'll just have to adapt to that. But yeah, that was one of them. So the next one was gendered bathrooms.
Yeah, like have privacy in design, right? Have it so it's nice and private, whoever goes in there, and it's got a big proper door rather than just a stall door, and then the bathrooms wouldn't need a gender. You'd literally just, whatever gender you like, just make sure you wash your hands. That's all it needs to be. We also had the suggestion of straight cis people thinking they have the right to comment on our lives, which I think has been touched on before, but yes, absolutely, you are not an expert in the trans experience if you are not yourself trans.
And then the next one after that is TERFs.
Because of course it is.
Although sometimes when I see the word TERFs appear and people say, oh, it's a TERFs again, sometimes I think using TERFs isn't... I usually refer to anti-trans people as anti-trans activists rather than just TERFs, because sometimes it's used as an umbrella term, isn't it?
It is, yeah. So TERF is the acronym for Trans Excluding Radical Feminist, and there's a fairly strong argument that they are not feminists. They're appropriating that, but they are not actually feminists, so don't call them TERFs because that's kind of legitimizing them as feminists.
Oh, exactly. And you get the gender criticals, which is a nickname they wanted to be called by.
Well, in fairness, they've also perfectly owned the phrase TERF. You have seen them say, keep on trucking, keep on turfing. And they've said that in their own news groups and on Mumsnet and stuff. Like, yeah, I'm a TERF, I'm proud of it.
Oh, exactly.
But so then them turning around to us and saying TERF is a slur, it's like, well, it's not when you guys say it.
No, they seem to use it back. So that's sort of why we sort of go for, because like you get gender critical or TERF, but then we sort of go with what's underlying all that anti-trans activism.
Anti-trans activists.
So,
yes, exactly. That's how we do it.
So that's why I usually avoid using that wording, if you notice on our pods.
Yeah. I tend to do the same. And if I say gender critical, I try and put obvious air quotes around it. So, yeah, that's Room 101. That's a lot of stuff that I'm sure you've sat there nodding your head along with, especially the bit about Crocs and socks.
Especially that bit.
Oh, definitely. That's something we can all agree on. But yes, so we've rattled through all of the social media that we're on. So why don't you give us a follow? Come and check us out on Twitter or Twix, /WhatTheTrans. We're, of course, on Facebook. We're on Instagram. We're on Blue Sky. We're on Threads. We're on Mastodon. We have a Discord.
Yes, actually, I had a thing to talk about the Discord, actually. So
please do.
On our Discord, we've currently got a new sort of feature as part of our Discord server where you can upload a news story, like let's say the Liz Truss anti-trans bill. You just link to say here's a mega thread on the Liz Truss bill, and then there's like a whole containerized way you can discuss a news story with other people. And essentially this Discord is now going to become more of a thing of discussing the news with this cool little format, and it's a thing that you should all check out because it's really cool.
Yes, agreed. Do come and join us on our Discord, which has been running since the pandemic, because that's when we started it up. Yeah, that's all from us. Sorry we've taken up so much of your time already with our nonsense, but thank you for listening. We'll be back in 2 weeks, but if you can't wait that long for some What the Trans content, don't worry. Our American comrades will be with you on the 25th, and we will speak to you ourselves on the 1st of April, which seems appropriate. Thanks for giving us a listen, and we'll speak to you soon. Bye-bye! This episode of What the Trans was written and produced by Ashley Talbot and Alex Bedwell, was edited by Ben Swithin, and with our shiny new theme tune by Waritsara Yui Karlberg. We'd especially like to thank our producer-level Patreons, who are Elizabeth Anderson,
Bernice Roust,
Ellen Meller,
Jay Hoskins,
Trowan,
Ashley,
Matty B,
Squid Xena,
Setcat,
Jane,
Roberto DePrunk,
Rose Absolute,
Sarah,
Cena,
Kiki T,
Derek,
Sky Killane,
Eric Widman,
B,
Jude,
Monsieur Squirrel,
Fergus Evans,
Anubis a Jackal,
Kamina,
Brandon Craig,
Break the System,
Sean Phillips,
Heidi Reardon,
Ezra,
Sophia Lasixth,
Lentil,
Philippa Teprog,
Alethea Aurora,
Clara Volume,
Amelia,
Corvina Ravenheart, the trans metal DJ from Twitch and VR chat, will play St. Lucifer for props.
Tabitha Joe Cox, aka Candy,
Fiona McDonnell,
Torikuso H,
Murgatroyd,
Ontologically Unjust,
Stella,
Cindergosa,
Rebecca Prentice,
Crazy Richard,
Dan Oblivion,
Florence Stanley,
The Cthulhu Kid,
Helen _
Chrissy Jarvis,
Ellie Hollingsworth bought too many magic cards. That's a mood.
Nick Ross,
Alice Chalkley,
Melody Nix,
Fiona Punchard,
John,
Nick Duffy,
CB Bailey,
Gordon Cameron,
Ted Delphos,
Wen Riverup,
Vic Parsons,
Patreon user,
Vic Kelly,
Catherine,
Sabrina McVeigh,
Cassius Adair,
Melissa Brooks,
Karakan12,
April Heller,
Sophie Lewis,
Alexandra Lilly,
Claire Scott,
Ariadne Peña,
Lauren O'Nions,
Bernard's Pink Jelly Bean,
Lanos,
and Chris Hubley. Thank you very much, and see you later. Bye!